This is GARIS Masculist MGTOW flyers, that is 2 3-page essays on the themes of masculism and MGTOW, written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. This is flyer number 223, entitled Masculist Contempt for Women's Evolved Hypergamous Parasitism. Description. This flyer lashes out at women's evolved hypergamous parasitism. Masculists know that women evolved to be parasitic on men, but in today's contraceptive pill world, women can work, so must work, or be punished by men for being immoral, parasitic, manslaving vermin, spat at by men and punished by men by not having one, rotting on the shelf to extinction. Flyer itself. Masculist Contempt for Women's Evolved Hypergamous Parasitism by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. Something popping up. Women have been parasites on men for several million years. They evolved that way. In the distant past, the baby's head doubled in size in a mere million years, so that women's birth canals had to be wider for the baby's head to pass through. But there's a limit to the width before the stresses on the hip bone become too large, causing hip bone fracture, which was always fatal. So evolution favoured women who gave birth prematurely, so that the baby's head continued to grow after the birth. But a prematurely born baby is useless. It cannot fend for itself because it is so underdeveloped. So new mothers need to be constantly on hand to take care of these prematurely born babies, and hence the mothers are not free to roam for food at long distances from the home. This in turn created a new problem for women: how to get protein that was so vital for their survival. The only option they had was to get protein from scarce male-hunted meat. But why should men give them meat when their own survival was also in jeopardy? So women evolved to become prostitutes to men by losing their days of being in sexual heat the way monkeys or dogs are. Women evolved to become the sexiest of mammals, where every day of the month is a day of sexual heat. The sexier the woman, the more able she was to bribe men to give her and her babies scarce male-hunted meat. Women evolved to manipulate men due to their dependency on meat for their very survival. A woman who was unable to attract the attention of a man often died because she lacked protein, she lacked male-hunted meat. This argument can be generalized. Women also evolved to be hypergamous. That is, if a better male meat provider turned up, who was intellectually smarter and therefore a better hunter, better able to give her meat that he more capably hunted, then it was in her self-interest, if circumstances were realistic, to coldly, disloyally dump her current male meat provider and give her vagina to the superior, smarter male hunter. Female hypergamy makes obvious evolutionary sense. We are all here today thanks to women evolving this hypergamous sense of always being on the lookout for a more sexploitable male provider. Women do not love men blindly the way men tend to love women once they are regularly sexing their female sexual partners. Evolution made it easier for a woman to sexploit a man by use of the male frontal lobe switch off. That is, when a man sees his regular female sexual partner, the frontal lobes of his brain switch off. The frontal lobes are responsible for long-term planning and critical thinking. Nature found it necessary to switch off men's critical thinking when faced with his regular female sexual partner, making it much easier for her to sexploit him. You've probably heard of the expression, if the sex is good, a man can tolerate a lot in a woman. This truism is the simple consequence of the male frontal lobe switch-off. Women do not have this frontal lobe switch-off, so they can remain in their coldly calculating sexploitative mode to amorally extract meat from her manslave, her meat provider. Women evolved to find men who gave them more meat to be more sexually attractive. Women sexually selected better male meat hunters. Those men who were intellectually smarter than average tended to be better hunters, making smarter judgments on how to hunt down meat sources. Thus, just as women gave themselves sexually to bigger, stronger, fiercer men, who would be more able to defend these women against the big, strong, fierce men of enemy tribes, men became sexually selected by women to become bigger, stronger, fiercer than women. So too, due to female sex selection of more intelligent men, that is, superior hunters, men became intellectually smarter than women by about 4 IQ points, and with bigger brains, about 10% bigger in brain volume. This is how women evolved. They evolved to be coldly calculating, sexploitative, manslaving manipulators of men, who once the sex was good, became moldable, intellectually uncritical putty to women. Masculists know this and understand it, but we now live in the age of the contraceptive pill, household gadgets and higher education, all male inventions. Women now have been freed from household drudgery and have become free to enter the workforce and share in the burden of earning the living with men. However, a large proportion of women have not taken up the burden of sharing the earning of the living equally with men. At age 16, 3/4 of young women choose the intellectually easy, intellectually lazy option of studying the soft option of memory-based majors, such as English literature, history, languages, etc., instead of the more intellectually demanding majors that require abstract analytical thought, such as math and the sciences. That is, these young women become what the Masculists call fluffy crappers, studying fluffy crap. What will make them fluffies, that is, traditional women who expect to be able to parasite off the money of a man, in their 30s. These fluffy crappers are then excluded from studying STEM, S-T-E-M, science, tech, engineering, math, and the professions at university, because they do not have the necessary prerequisites from high school. These fluffy crappers then study more fluffy crap at college, ending up with a fluffy crap diploma, which the economy does not value, so they end up with low-paying jobs, which will not allow them to be able to afford to buy a middle-class house on her own to raise her kids in. So what will she do? She will do what women have done for millions of years. She will sexploit some gullible male, fuck him regularly until his frontal lobes switch off, then make him her manslave, so that he works for her, so that she can sit on her fat parasitic ass and live off his labour, having a standard of living that she is incapable of providing for herself, but that he can. She is sitting pretty, living off his male work and effort. In other words, she will become a fluffy, a female, amoral parasite. Feminists are still women, so share the same genes with fluffies, so it's not surprising that most feminists still have fluffy attitudes when it comes to men. The most blatant example occurs in the divorce courts that the fluffy feminists took over in the 70s. Being feminists, these fluffy feminist divorce court judges and lawyers saw men as the enemy, so used their positions of authority as judges and lawyers to punish men, seeing them as subhuman cash machines to be financially abused and exploited in favour of their fluffy ex-wives. These fluffy feminazi divorce court judges and lawyers are an extreme example of the typical fluffy feminist hypocrite who wants equal rights with men but rejects equal obligations with men, namely sharing out the burden of earning the living, so that women have to bother to get a career-competent education so that they can become FIPs, financially independent persons, the opposite of fluffies, as adults, and not parasite off the labour of a man, that is, sexploit some gullible manslave. Masculists are men's livers. Their main political goal is to wipe out manslavery worldwide this century by wiping out the fluffies and fluffy feminists, not by killing them, but simply ignoring them to death, so that they rot on the shelf to extinction. Masculists are very moralistic, placing enormous moral pressure on fluffies to fip up or be punished by men by not having one. Fluffies are seen as immoral, parasitic, manslaving vermin by masculists, to be wiped out by being utterly rejected and spat at by masculists for being the fluffy vermin that they are. Women evolved to be sexploitative of men, so it's not surprising that women today still judge men by their level of male sexploitability, and much less so on men's other qualities, for example their intelligence, their sense of humour, their good looks, height, etc. The top criterion of a fluffy in judging a man is his level of sexploitability, that is, how many resources, how much money can she extract from him for her own purposes, that is, how much of a manslave could he become for her. Masculists get really angry at being seen by women, and especially fluffies, as sexploitable manslaves. The masculists have a saying, "I'm more than a cash machine, you bitch," and reject women who have fluffy attitudes. One of the core realities between the two sexes is that men have the financial power to force women to fip up, that is, become fips, pulling their own financial weight. Nearly all men are fips. Men are socialized by parents and educated by teachers to become fips. A woman who's a fluffy can only be a fluffy if she can manage to get her financial claws into some sexploitable manslave. But the MGTOWs, men going their own way, and Masculists have caused the supply of such manslavable men to have nearly dried up. Today, in a string of major countries, for example the US, Japan, Germany, etc., 2/3 of young men under 35 refuse to marry, refuse to have kids, and spend their money on themselves, utterly rejecting the traditional manslave role and spitting on fluffy parasites. In a decade, that percentage will probably be over 90%, so that any woman stupid enough to express publicly that she expects some manslave to work for her will be ostracized and punished severely by men by not getting one. She will be forced to rot on the shelf where she belongs, instead of bothering to fip up as a moral, responsible adult. But women are not responsible adults. They have 10 billion fewer neurons in their brains for a start, which is probably the most damnable fact against women. Women evolved to be amoral and sexploitative of men. That's how they survived. So we have here the ingredients of a real sex war. On the one hand, women evolved to be sexploiters of men, parasiting off men's labour for several million years. On the other hand, the new attitude of the Masculists, that we now live in the age of the contraceptive pill, so now that women can work, they must work, because anything else is exploitation of men, and is hence immoral and punishable by men. Men have the financial power to punish women for being fluffies by ignoring them to death. Men don't need women to survive economically, because nearly all men are fips. Men are socialized and educated to be fips, so men are in a position to force women to be fips or they don't eat. That is, the women. Masculists are putting enormous moral pressure on young women to study career-competent majors at high school and university, so that they can be responsible fips as adults, and not expect to parasite off the labour of some stupid, ignorant manslave, still untouched by Masculist and MGTOW ideas. Masculists have a hatred of fluffies and fluffy feminists, and aim to wipe them out. Men have the power to do that, and as Masculist and MGTOW ideas spread and spread across the planet, increasingly women will be forced to adapt to male pressure on them to fip up, stop being immoral, parasitic, fluffy vermin, and learn to pull their financial weight. Masculists push women to adopt an attitude of being an EMO, equal moral obligations, FIP. That is, having the moral expectation that she feels obliged to be FIP, that she feels it would be highly immoral and reprehensible to be a fluffy parasite on a man by having been too lazy as a youth to have bothered to get a career-competent education. Such women are punished by Masculists. Thus women are now really stuck. They're being forced by men to go against their millions of years evolved sexploitative attitude of judging a man by his level of sexploitability. Women evolved to be hypergamous, to coldly, disloyally dump a man if he loses his sexploitability, his ability to be a manslave to her parasitic whims. Women are today being forced to fight their own biology, which is something very difficult to do, but women have no choice. If they remain fluffies in practice, that is by not bothering to get a career-competent education and end up fluffies as adults, then they will be rejected by men and hence live miserable lives, manless, sexless, loveless, babyless, and poor, spat at by men and punished by men by not having one, rotting on the shelf, just waiting to die, rejected by men and increasingly by women, as women adopt masculine standards of morality. Speaking personally as both a man and a masculist, when I sense some woman judging me almost exclusively by how much money I make and ignoring my other qualities, my high professorial intelligence, my vision, my creativity, my articulateness, my extensive knowledge, etc., then I just cross off that woman as potentially interesting. I treat her with contempt as just another fluffy to be punished by being an immoral, manslaving parasite that is utterly contemptible, to be punished, to be rejected, to be left rotting on the shelf, getting the treatment from men that she deserves, that is, spat at. So women are now learning that they have to hide their true parasitic natures and pretend to men that they are emo-fips, giving lip service to the masculist slogans that women are to be fips and pull their weight, even though deep down women are crypto-fluffies by nature. Tough! We men have the financial power to force women to fip up, and so women will fip up or pay a horrible price. They will have to use their 10 billion fewer neurons brain to adapt to male pressure and fip up. Those women who don't, those women who insist on expressing their true fluffy parasite nature, will have their fluffy feminist bitch genes removed from the gene pool by not having babies. Future generations of women will have been genetically filtered to be more fip-like. Fluffydom is not only dying sociologically, but genetically, and a good thing too. Cheers. Prof. Dr. Hugo de GARIS. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. YouTube channels de GARIS, Masculist, MGTOW, Flyers, and Hugo de GARIS.